Hi, this is Brent, and I'm very, very pleased and excited to have a very special guest today on the Climate Guru podcast, Kimberly Haley-Coleman, the founder and CEO of GlobalWare. She helps coordinate people, individuals, families that go to different countries around the world to do volunteerism, or voluntourism it's really called, combining a personal trip with helping a community. So welcome, Kimberly. It's so exciting to have you here.
Hello, Brent. Thank you so much for having me.
It's volunteerism or voluntourism is a force for good, combining adventure, meaningful service, protect the environment. And much of it really it helps communities. So we want to get into that. Before we do, I just want to say that Kimberly has a very distinguished background in academics and in the working world, made a transition around 2001 to create this marvelous organization called GlobalWare.
Brent, like so many, I didn't actually know where I would end up. I decided to try and use my time in a meaningful way, serving. And I contacted anybody I could think of, Habitat for Humanity, any sort of volunteering program. And I found that really nobody wanted me short term. Nobody wants to take someone off of whatever they are doing full time to oversee a very short term volunteer. The amount of time and training it takes makes it really an unsustainable equation. But anyway, that's how it really began.
Pastor, for example, might have a project where he's building houses, these traditional houses in Africa, but it's an ongoing project. And your folks might come in, the volunteers might come in for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to add a helping hand. So the project's ongoing, even if your folks come home.
Well, is a little bit of a wrinkle on that. It's not that we are building the same house and new teams of volunteers are coming in. A wattle and daub style home can be finished in a week. So we will build
I
with our
see.
group of volunteers. Most of our projects we finish while the volunteers are there.
Oh, wow.
On occasion, there will be, it's too humid and the plaster hasn't finished. So maybe the next group will have to finish that piece before moving on to the next. But we're not building hospitals and roads and really large scale projects. We're tending to do smaller style homes.
I was noticing the countries you're going to, of course, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, Vietnam. You have organizations local and you have your own coordinators on the ground that make sure that things are organized and they'll be staying in a safe place and they'll have safe travel and there'll be someone there to guide them. All the reviews I've seen about Globalware are the marvelous reviews about the safety and the organization of what you're doing on the ground.
Yeah, and we really were restricted in many senses by those requirements. So for us, we are only operating in environments we see as safe. So we're not putting people high on ladders and operating heavy equipment and machinery. They're not handling bodily fluids because we are not Doctors Without Borders. We're not doing post earthquake cleanup. That's really a very highly specialized, trained position. We're not paramilitary, so we cannot operate just because there's extreme need. We're not in Darfur, Somalia, Afghanistan, Palestine. As much as there may be need, that's not what we do. While we do have quite a breadth of where we serve, and Bhutan is such a great example, a country where people do have so much less materially than what someone from North America might be familiar with, but they really have an appreciation for life and the present that it can be hard for someone from North America to have. And we measure GDP as one of our guiding measures of what our country has done at any given moment. And Bhutan actually measures gross national happiness.
Another way to measure the success of a country.
Yeah, and you think, well, how do you do that? Well, they have very specific measures, and everyone can tell you about them.
Tell me what the project is in Bhutan. I'm just fascinated by you're going there. It's a small country, very little tourism, just beginning to pick up. Very, very safe. A lot of Buddhists in that place. So, what are you doing in Bhutan? What are your folks
So
doing
we
there?
First of all, it's special because we were invited there, gosh, back in 2019, 2020, right before COVID. And they were closed for a couple of years, but we were invited by His Majesty, the king there, King Wangchuck, and who gave up all of his power years ago. And people rioted in the streets for a couple of years asking him not to step down. He did step down. He lives in a very humble way. But we're working with Buddhist monks, schools, communities built. Um, marketplaces that are covered for people to sell whatever, whether it's sewing or food or excess produce. We've been working on their first baseball diamond, and there's actually a Netflix series. There was a photo that went viral of kids in their national Bhutanese costumes playing baseball right in front of one of their big Buddhist statues that went all around the world, and ESPN took off with it. Anyway, so there's all sorts of interesting things happening in Bhutan. Very peaceful, tiny little country wedged between two giants, China and
Right.
India.
There couldn't be more cultural differences and language
Yeah.
differences between North Americans and Bhutan. So, how do you turn these vast cultural differences and language between the volunteer and the community into a positive, enriching experience for the
Yeah.
volunteer and the community members?
So, it's definitely what the week is about. I would say we never go, if somebody's in the Peace Corps for 27 months, they're going to learn more than you can in a week. So I need to say that up front. But first of all, we do start by providing orientation materials, of course, to our volunteers. Once they get there, our coordinator, who most of our coordinators have been working with us for decades, and so they take our volunteers through an orientation
And
process.
then they're bilingual. They understand the
And
local
they're
culture and
always
language.
bilingual. They're bilingual with the volunteers the whole time. Again, you've got small groups of 10. And then every day we begin the day with a cultural exercise, an issue that we'll discuss. It is designed to help people understand that local culture. So, for example, in Thailand, it's more offensive to show your impatience or anger than it is to be late. What does that mean when you're living in a culture? So we'll discuss something every day in each country. And then in the evening, we discuss something that it'll be a question like, what is a kindness you observed? Or it might be, what is something you are grateful for? So by the time that they arrive, we don't expect that they're speaking the language, so we will teach them a few words, but they're meeting the local community. And when they're learning how to do the project, they're usually watching, standing side by side people. They're not explaining it. And it's amazing how much you can get from being next to someone and observing using your eyes and your hands. It's not all language.
Right,
We do have all the tools, right? The cell phones that can translate,
right.
but we found people are often overly fearful about communication when they really don't need to be.
How do you gain the trust of the locals who might be illiterate in some countries? They live in local cultures and traditions, and they have traditional family values, and they're not familiar with the ways and the culture of North Americans. So, how do you gain their trust so that you can really make a meaningful contribution?
It's a great question because there can be hesitancy and natural distrust. Most, the communities know who we are, they recognize us, and they know that we're coming to stand beside them. We're there to learn about their culture, honor their culture, not to change it. And they are choosing the projects and how we do them. They're choosing the materials. The buy-in comes from the indigenous communities. It's their choice. And so I think a lot of the trust comes from all of those factors.
Wonderful. My podcast and my videos are focused mainly on environmental issues, sustainability issues. So, can you give us one or two examples of the kind of projects you've done in these developing
Yeah.
countries that have to do with protecting the environment or sustainability?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. So, an Adobe Lorena stove in Cusco, Peru, once you leave the city proper of Cusco, once you get toward the outskirts, you'll come across a whole lot of people with no running water, no electricity. And the way they're cooking, they've got open earth for their floors in their homes. They will go and collect whatever they can find in terms of firewood. They're cooking on the open floor because it's cold, warms their homes, but it also means they're breathing in all of that smoke.
Right, right,
It's not very hygienic and it takes a lot of firewood.
right.
So we build these Adobe Lorena stoves. We didn't invent them with a vent pipe to pull the smoke out.
Mhm.
So it means now they're able to cook up off the floor. It takes 80% less fuel. So it helps in terms of reducing deforestation in the area. It keeps
Right.
that fire, the fuel, and the warmth much more contained. So it's the kind of project where we're doing something very quickly that environmentally is helping, but it's also helping for the health of the humans living in that home
Right.
because they're not breathing in all that
Right.
smoke.
One of the big issues in Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia is deforestation. So this is going to help slow that down. Wonderful. So one last question. Folks that are listening or have heard of Global Aware before or learning now, how would they contact you? How would they qualify for to be a volunteer? What personal characteristics or other things do they need in order to qualify? And do you have a process where you screen them?
So it starts with a willingness to do this, right? And so we make it pretty easy. It's like going on a cruise or summer camp, in the sense that people go to our website and choose where and when they want to go and register in that way. Usually they'll call us first, talk to somebody in our offices. In our materials, we point out there are certain locations. Cusco in Peru is one of them, because it's a very high altitude, that if somebody has any sort of breathing or asthma issues, it's very important for them to talk to their doctor before they go. But we're not putting our volunteers alone with children or in charge of the health of anyone.
I just want to congratulate you again on this marvelous program that you've dedicated yourself to since 2001. Countries all over the world, every region of the world, you're doing so much good, not only for local communities, but for folks who travel. I was reading a quote by Mark Twain, and he said, "The best antidote to ignorance and prejudice is travel, especially for young people." So congratulations on what you're doing. And if somebody wants to contact Global Aware, how would they do it?
So anywhere you'd look with those words, globe aware, the biggest mistake people make is making it global. So
Okay.
thank you, Brent, for saying global aware, because we do, whether it's our website, it's globeware.com, .org, .ca, our podcast, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, all of it, Instagram, it's all globe aware. So that's how you find us.
Wonderful. Thank
Any
you
of
so
those.
much for spending your time with us and sharing your life and your interest in this and developing this on a global scale and doing so much for the communities and for the individuals, enriching them and broadening them, especially their children, to see how the whole world lives. Thank you very much, Kimberly.
Well, please do, Brent. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.